The University of Chicago engaged Envision Strategies to elevate its campus dining experience, aiming to redefine how culinary services are delivered across its facilities. By incorporating student feedback and innovative culinary trends, this project envisions a retail food service operation that is not only efficient, but also deeply aligned with the diverse tastes and lifestyles of the university community. Please welcome Ann Roebuck to the Art of Culinary Spaces as we delve into this forward-thinking approach to campus dining. Well, welcome to the show today, and we're here today to talk about the University of Chicago Dining Project. And the first question I always like to ask is, how did this project come about for you and Envision?
Sure. University of Chicago has been a long-term client of Envision Strategies, and we had done an RFP for them back in 2015, and that contract was up and they were ready to do a program assessment and RFP again. So that just essentially opened the door for a repeat process, but it turned out a little different.
Yeah, well, you got to love when the projects keep coming back from the same client. That shows you did a good job the first time, and you've got to value those clients when you've got them for sure.
Absolutely.
Kind of what was the project's timeline, and what was their budget in mind in the beginning? I'm sure it changes over times, like every other project. But what was it like in the beginning?
Well, the project started for us at the beginning of 2020, and it was actually a program assessment and then turned into an RFP project.
Okay.
And the budget itself was really our fee and then what they were willing to pay for their services for their dining program.
Right.
And so I think they had a little flexibility, quote unquote, on budget.
Now, one thing that they did a little differently that not a lot of universities do, probably not a lot of contract service feeders do either, they decided to go with a hybrid dining model, and they implemented it at the University of Chicago. What inspired that development or that change of methodology for them?
Well, as I had mentioned, we had done several RFPs with them, and I think they were beginning to realize that you do an RFP, you might change a supplier, but yet the outcome isn't different. So there's something inherently wrong with the program. It might not be the operator, but it's something is wrong with the structure of the program. And I think it was through this RFP process that we collectively came up with what was going on. So we, in the process, asked for two options in the RFP. One was a residential only proposal, and then the second was the typical residential and retail proposal. And we asked the bidders to submit on one or both, and we started looking at them, and it was like, okay, if we pick the residential and retail, we haven't really changed anything. How can we expect the outcome to be different?
Right.
And so we were looking at option A and said, retail has been the problem child, if you will, of the program. It wasn't making money. Historically, it didn't make money. So how could we change the retail model? And it was great because the university has an office of civic engagement, which goes out and incorporates local businesses in the 8 zip codes around the University of Chicago. So they knew a lot of people in the area, a lot of business owners, and together with the supplier that they thought they were going to select, the supplier said, well, we'd be willing to manage the local restaurateurs. If you find them and together we can source them and we'll essentially manage them. So you, University of Chicago, you don't have that ongoing process of managing. And it ended up and turned out to be really the success story that they needed.
Well, that's fantastic. I love when you've got a client that's willing to look beyond or outside the box, if you will, of doing things differently. Now, the other thing they did differently too, which I don't know if people are familiar, maybe you can touch on the beginning of what it's normally like, but they also decided that they would actually purchase equipment and be responsible for that rather than the contracted caterer to do that. For those that aren't familiar with the public, talk a little bit about how it usually happens and what the University of Chicago decided to do instead.
Yeah, so typically, when you go out for an RFP, the bidder, the supplier, will provide capital investment. But that capital investment isn't quote unquote free money, right? It comes from somewhere. And if you want to change the program or do something, typically what happens is the amount of money that you pay the supplier for providing your all you care to eat service is called a daily rate. As the supplier keeps adding capital investment or other options on to the program,
Yeah.
that daily rate increases. And so essentially the program is built on the backs of the meal plan holders because they're the ones typically using the all you care to eat. So the University of Chicago said, hey, we want to focus on residential dining. They call it their dining commons. They have 4. And we want to provide the best service there. We want to provide high-end foods. We want to provide halal, kosher, allergen-free at every single one. And we want this to be best practice for the industry. Yeah. And to do that, they wanted the lowest daily rate that they could get to provide that service, that expectation. And to do that, they absorbed any capital investment, any equipment replacement. In the prior contract, the university and the supplier were like swapping money. One would pay for one thing, another would pay for the other. And we just decided to simplify it. The university would take on almost everything, and the supplier would focus on what they did best.
Nice. Now, the university also did something differently. What I loved reading about this project is that, again, they did a lot of things differently than most happen during an RFP process for whether it's a university or a contract, business and industry type thing or whatever. They also created a special internal team to work on this project from the University of Chicago. How did that help you all with the RFP and then also going through the entire process to have a team that was specialty built essentially for this?
Yeah, so having that team was great because they knew exactly what they wanted. They looked for us for examples of things that are happening in the industry that they might want to ask for in the RFP, but virtually they knew exactly what they wanted. And they had the talent on staff to help write those technical aspects as to articulate what they were looking for. And I just want to mention that all of that, the foundation of that was laid back in, I think, like 2011 when they did their master plan. And Richard Mason, who is now Associate VP of, I think it's Student Campus Life at the University of Chicago, he was very instrumental in setting the foundation to intentionally build the University of Chicago dining team to bring on subject matter experts. So they had the knowledge base. They didn't have to solely rely on their supplier.
Right.
They could almost work in collaboration to elevate the program.
Well, so that brings me to my next question, which is when you're helping them look through the proposals and stuff to choose who the next contractor would be, what was the main criteria that you were looking for to bring in a new partner? What was the main criteria through the RFP process that you and the University of Chicago were looking for?
So they were really focused on that residential dining component, and they really wanted to elevate that level, that service area. So we really looked at what was being provided, how it was being provided, and they wanted to find a way to make the program successful where it hadn't been previously. And that option of having the retail being operated by local restaurateurs, I think was the win-win in the process. And the other thing that we focused on, and I mentioned it before, was that the very best daily rate to get the program that they wanted. They didn't want they want the lowest, but they had a level of expectation that they wanted to maintain, right? So
Right.
they knew where they thought they might come in. And so it was finding that supplier who could deliver their expectations for the best rate.
Well, the bringing in the outside restaurants, local community restaurants to be a part of the retail side is very intriguing. I know a lot of universities that partner with local restaurants, but you have to go out and use your cash or whatever it is on your card and everything. But this is a different way of actually bringing them in onto the campus. Can you explain, maybe without giving away all the secrets, but can you give us a little bit of idea how that works with the university, and then also, have you had a chance to hear back from the students of their response to it having local restaurants?
Yeah, so it sounds great. Let's bring a local restaurateur on campus, right? So we get some
Right.
local flair, and that's wonderful. And the students get some variety in their menu, and they get some diversity of food options. But think about it from the restaurateur's perspective. They're a small business owner, and here you are bringing them into this large institution that
Right.
has different ways of operating. They have a lot of red tape, a lot of mechanisms, a lot of hoops to jump through. And I really think the goal to do that is to provide them with the education and helping them step by step kind of navigate what it takes to become a provider of any type of campus service in a larger environment than what they're used to. And I think it was the right mix for the University of Chicago to have the
Yeah.
right supplier, their Office of Civic Engagement, and that willingness from UChicago Dining to try to make this all work.
And has the feedback been good about, has the student love it or mixed
It's
reviews,
been
or
great.
been great?
The students are loving it. They one local restaurateur. He runs Peaches Cafe. He opened up a
Right.
second location on campus,
Oh
offering a
wow.
slightly different menu, and the feedback has been great. And the students love supporting the local
Yeah.
businesses. And I also want to mention that there are 4 on-campus coffee houses that are student run.
Oh wow.
And they have always been on the University of Chicago. They've always been student run. So the University of Chicago is not new to doing things a little bit differently
Yeah.
than we typically see in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been a consultant for a long time. What's, from your perspective, what's the most important factors for a successful partnership between a university and a contracted caterer company?
So I think for a successful partnership, the two parties have to really be aligned on their mission. They have to both have the same goals. They have to both be going down that same path together. And I think there has to, in any relationship, there has to be good communication, right?
Yeah.
Things go
Right.
wrong,
Right.
things happen. You have to be able to talk about it. And then I think the other is a level of trust. And I think in today's world, the level of trust almost leads to a transparency, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Where are dollars being spent? Where is the food being coming from? And on the university side as well, So for me, those are the 3 big things that are important in creating a partnership and making it successful.
What advice would you give to other universities considering a similar approach to their dining services, whether it be the hybrid model, whether it be creating the team? What are some, let's say, tips or tricks, if you will, that you have seen come out of this project that would benefit other universities in the future?
Yeah, so I think the hybrid model I think is a good model, but it might not be for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand what are your goals for your program, and then do you have that support mechanism that it might take to have multiple suppliers, and who's going to be responsible for them, and do you have that expertise or the team? Because most dining programs that are contracted, they have 1 or 2 people who oversee the program,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And do they have the bandwidth to do the job that they need to be doing? to do a hybrid model, and it may work and it may not work. The University of Chicago, put in over time, added their expertise
Right.
to get them to this point today.
Right. Yeah, basically they really had to set the foundation much earlier than they actually implemented that.
That's
Long time,
correct.
like you said, 13 or roughly 10, 12 years before they could really get into it.
Right. And they built their team. And I believe Christopher Toot joined their team. I believe it was like back in 2012. And he's been instrumental in finding those expertise, those team members who could support him, his ideas, and bringing it all together. And collectively, they were all on the same path, the same goals. They knew what they wanted, and they knew how to articulate that. And I think many times universities seem to not know exactly what they want. They want their program to be better, but they can't put their finger on what it is that's going to make it better.
Right. And so many of them, I've worked at 3 universities in my career, and so many of them are afraid to ask for, not really afraid, but they don't bring in the outside help that they really need to bring in sometimes. They think because it's a university, because it's education, they think they can fix it themselves or solve it themselves. And it's really important to bring in the people like yourself that know what questions to ask, what to bring into it before you even get started. You can shorten that amount of time frame to figure out the answer so much so, and avoid a lot of those big mistakes, or to find a program like this with the University of Chicago where it's a hybrid model of bringing in locals and bringing in the dining separate. So I think it's really good. It's a really great example of how it can be done differently.
Right. And I just want to mention too, at University of Chicago, the individual who led their procurement effort didn't just kind of stand on the sidelines and say, okay, here, consultant, you are, you help us, you guide us. They really dug in deep with us and said, okay, can we do this? Should we do that? And it was a true collaboration. It wasn't us just saying, well, I think we should do it this way because we've had success in it in the past. It was a good collaboration, and they really dug into the details. So when they got to the point where they were needing to negotiate those fine points in the contract, they knew enough about the program. They didn't need me. And that's the way it should be, right?
Right.
They're going to have to live with this contract. I'm not.
Right. Yeah, exactly. What was the most enjoyable aspect of working on this project?
Well, the people are always the most enjoyable aspect. But I do want to say, and might sound strange, but I really like the RFP processes because when I get the proposals, I think it's Christmas morning. It's like unwrapping a gift and finding the surprise solution that somebody else has come up with the entire program. I just love digging into them and reading what people think are the solutions and what their ideas are. I really love that part of it.
That's great. And how can the public find out more about you and Envision Strategies?
Sure. They can just go to www.envstrategies.com, and we would happy to be able to help them in any of their food service endeavors, and look forward to doing more projects like this.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Art of Culinary Spaces. We hope this conversation has sparked your creativity and inspired new ideas within the world of food service design and planning. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of our future podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode when we explore another groundbreaking project and exceptional design from FCSI members that are transforming the culinary landscape.